I was trapped in a Dubai hotel suite for a week, expected to be available 24/7 while a regular client forced every humiliating thing he wanted.
My name is Sarah, but everybody's always called me Sorry. I'm 27 now, and I was in that life for a little over 2 years. I grew up in Sarajevo, in this small apartment where you could hear the neighbors through the walls. My dad was a mechanic, always covered in grease, and my mom worked as a nurse. They both went through the war years, but they tried hard to keep things normal for us kids. I was the youngest of three, the loud one, always singing in the church choir or dragging my sister to dance in the living room when the music came on. Life wasn't easy, but it felt like we had each other. By the time I was in university, things had gotten tighter. Dad's health wasn't great after he lost his regular job when I was 17. He still picked up whatever work he could, but it wasn't steady. Mom was exhausted from her shifts. I saw how they tried to hide it, but I knew. I started working as a barista at this little cafe near the old town while I studied psychology. I loved that job. The smell of coffee, the regulars who'd come in every morning, the way people would actually talk to you. I'd come home with tips in my pocket and feel like I was helping. I wanted to be a psychologist someday. I used to sit in lectures thinking about how I could help people who'd been through heavy stuff, war trauma, loss, all of that. My older sister was the one I told everything to. She was my person. We'd stay up late in our room, whispering about boys and dreams and how we were going to get out of the cycle our parents were stuck in. She got married when I was 22 and moved to another city with her husband. That hit harder than I expected. Suddenly it was just me and our parents in that apartment. Money was always on my mind after she left. I'd finish classes, run to the cafe for my shift, then come home and help Mom with dinner or sit with Dad while he complained about his back. I remember one night I was counting out the money from my tips at the kitchen table and realized it wasn't going to cover the bills again. Mom had this quiet way of saying everything was fine, but I could see the worry lines getting deeper. I kept thinking, I don't want to be another weight on them. They'd already given up so much. I was 23, still believing if I just worked harder, more shifts, better grades, maybe a scholarship, it would all work out. I'd walk home after closing the cafe some nights, past the lights in the old city, and feel this mix of tired and hopeful. I had my favorite hoodie I wore when it got cold, my notebooks full of lecture notes, and this little dream that one day I'd have my own office helping people. I wasn't naive, but I still thought I could protect my family from the worst. There were small cracks already, though, the way I'd sometimes skip meals to make sure there was enough for my parents, the quiet fear that I was one bad month away from everything falling apart. But back then, I still believed I could handle it. I was Sorry from Sarajevo, the girl who smiled at customers, studied late, and told herself everything was going to be okay. After my sister moved away, it was like the weight shifted onto my shoulders without anyone saying it out loud. At first, it was just little things. I'd get to the cafe and realize I'd only slept 4 hours because I was up studying. My manager was nice, but they kept cutting my hours when business was slow, and I'd stand there wiping tables wondering how I was going to make up the difference. Then the bills started piling up in that drawer in the kitchen. The heating one came in higher than usual one winter. Dad's medicine wasn't covered completely anymore. Mom tried to act like it was no big deal, but I heard her on the phone with relatives again, using that careful voice she gets when she's asking for help. I hated it. I started picking up extra shifts, sometimes closing the cafe, and then going straight to morning lectures. My eyes would burn while I tried to take notes. I remember one afternoon I came home and found Dad sitting at the table with his head in his hands. His back had been acting up again, and he couldn't take on the repair jobs he used to. He looked so small in that moment. I wanted to say something comforting, but I just stood there with my bag still on my shoulder, feeling this knot in my stomach. That night, I told myself I'd handle more. I could do it. I was young, but it kept adding up. I failed one midterm because I was too tired to focus during the exam. The professor was understanding, but I felt like such a disappointment. My sister called less and less. She had her own life now, her husband, their new apartment. I missed her so much it ached sometimes. I'd come home after a long day, eat whatever was left from dinner, and just scroll on my phone in bed, too exhausted to even read my textbooks. Money became this constant background noise. I'd count my tips every night and feel my chest get tight when it wasn't enough. Mom started getting headaches from the stress. She'd come home from the hospital and just sit quietly. I tried to help more around the house, but I was running on empty. There were little arguments too, not big fights, just sharp words when everyone was worn out. I'd snap at something small and then feel guilty for days. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that if I just pushed through this semester, things would get better. But deep down, I could feel the cracks spreading. I was scared of becoming the reason everything fell apart. I was scared of letting them down, and I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. Things kept getting worse that spring. I was barely sleeping. My grades were slipping even more, and the cafe cut my shifts again. One night, the electricity bill came, and it was bigger than usual. Mom looked at it and just sighed, that tired sound that broke something in me. I sat on my bed afterwards, staring at the wall, thinking there had to be another way. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I even asked my professor if there was any work-study program I hadn't heard about. Nothing. I tried talking to my sister on the phone. She offered to send a little money, but I could hear her own stress on the other end. New marriage, new bills. I told her not to worry. I couldn't put that on her. Dad's doctor visits kept adding up. Mom's headaches turned into something the medicine barely touched. I watched them getting older right in front of me, worn down by the same struggle every single month, and I felt this heavy guilt, like I was watching them drown and I was just standing there. I thought about dropping out of university for a while, getting a full-time job, but that felt like giving up on the one thing I'd promised myself. I stayed up late one night making lists. Cut this, sell that, work more. None of it was enough. The fear of becoming a burden kept eating at me. I didn't want to be the reason they got sicker. I didn't want them to keep borrowing from relatives who were already struggling too. That's when I first heard about it. A girl I knew from the cafe mentioned it casually one night after closing, how some girls were making real money by spending time with men. I laughed it off at first. No way. That's not me. I'm the girl who studies psychology and wants to help people. But the number she threw out stuck in my head. It was more than I made in 2 months. I pushed the thought away for weeks. I told myself I was better than that. I felt ashamed even letting it cross my mind. But every time another bill came or I saw Mom wince when she stood up too fast, the idea came back louder. I kept thinking, maybe I could do it just a few times, just enough to get us through this rough patch. I'm only selling my time, not myself. I could control it. I could keep it separate from my real life. I fought with myself for so long, the shame, the fear, the what-ifs. But one evening, after another long day, I came home to find my dad asleep in his chair, looking completely worn out, and Mom quietly crying in the kitchen when she thought no one was looking. I went to my room, picked up my phone, and typed the message I'd been avoiding for weeks. My hands were shaking. I hit send, and when the reply came back with an offer, I stared at it for what felt like forever. Then I typed back one word. Yes. I remember the night so clearly it still makes my stomach turn. The guy who replied to my message set it up for that same weekend. I told my parents I was staying at a friend's place to study. I took the bus across town, then walked the last few blocks in the cold. The building was one of those newer apartment blocks near the river, nothing fancy from the outside, just glass doors and a buzzer system. My hands wouldn't stop shaking while I waited for him to answer. A man in his late 40s opened the door. He was polite, almost too polite. "You must be sorry," he said with a small smile. He had a nice watch and smelled like expensive cologne. The apartment was clean, modern, with big windows looking out over the city lights. He offered me a glass of water, and we sat on the couch for a few minutes, making awkward small talk about the weather and traffic. He explained how things would go, kept his voice calm like this was a normal business meeting. I nodded along, trying to look like I knew what I was doing. There was a long silence after that. He stood up and gestured toward the bedroom. I followed. The lights were dim. I noticed how soft the sheets felt, how quiet the room was except for the low hum of the heater. Everything after that happened in a kind of blur. I kept my mind somewhere else, focusing on the pattern on the curtains, counting the minutes. When it was over, he got dressed quickly and left some cash on the nightstand. "You did good," he said, not really looking at me. I took the money and folded it into my bag without counting it. My legs felt heavy as I walked back to the bathroom to fix my face. In the mirror, I looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. He called a taxi for me. The ride home was quiet. I stared out the window at the familiar streets, the money sitting in my bag like it weighed 100 pounds. When I got off a few blocks from my apartment, the night air hit me and I had to stop for a second. I stood there under a streetlight, heart pounding, realizing nothing would ever feel exactly the same again. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I slipped back into the apartment as quietly as I could, washed my face twice, and crawled into bed. Sleep didn't come for a long time. The first few months after that night were surreal. The money hit my account, and suddenly everything felt possible. I paid off the electricity bill, bought my dad the good pain medicine the doctor recommended, and still had enough left to breathe for once. I told my parents I got a better paying tutoring job. They believed me. I started dressing nicer for the meetings. A client bought me a coat that cost more than 3 months of my old cafe salary. Another one took me to this upscale restaurant where the waiter knew him by name. I sat there in the soft lighting, eating food I couldn't even pronounce, listening to him talk about his business deals like it was the most normal thing in the world. On the way home, I kept thinking, I can't believe this is my life now. There were trips too. A weekend in Belgrade with one guy who flew me business class just because he didn't want to travel alone. I remember looking out the plane window, thinking about how I used to count coins for bus fare, hotel rooms with views of the city, thick robes, room service at 3 in the morning. One client liked me to just sit with him in fancy bars while he closed deals on his phone. I'd listen to these powerful men casually talk about things that could ruin lives, and they treated me like I was invisible and important at the same time. The gifts kept coming: perfume, jewelry, a new phone when mine died. I moved some of my things to a small apartment I rented just for this part of my life. My parents thought I was sharing with a classmate. The lies got easier. I'd come home with cash and help with groceries, feeling like I was finally doing what I promised myself. I was taking care of them. But there were moments that stuck with me in a different way. The client who wanted me to wear a specific dress and just listen to him complain about his wife for 4 hours straight. The one who paid extra for me to pretend I was someone else entirely. The quiet dinners where men would share secrets about their companies or their marriages without thinking twice. I started recognizing the rules of this world. Smile, don't ask too many questions, never bring up your real life. Week by week, I crossed little lines I didn't even notice at the time, staying longer than I wanted, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, wearing things I never would have chosen for myself. The money made it feel worth it. My parents looked less stressed. I could breathe. The university was still there, but it started feeling further away. By the end of the first year, it didn't feel like two separate lives anymore. This had become my normal. The girl who used to pour coffee and dream about helping people was fading, and someone new was taking her place. I told myself I could handle it. I was in control. The second year is when it really started to wear me down. It didn't happen all at once. It was hundreds of small days that blurred together. I got good at reading people fast. One client, a quiet businessman from Zagreb, always wanted the same routine: dinner, then conversation about his kids, then the rest. He was polite, tipped well, but after the third time, I realized I was memorizing details about his family so I could ask the right questions next time. It felt like acting, except the curtain never came down. Another guy was different. He liked to talk about power, how he moved money around, how he controlled rooms full of people. He'd pay me to sit across from him in hotel bars and listen while he dropped names I didn't recognize. Sometimes he'd say things that made my skin crawl, not because he threatened me, but because of how casually he talked about ruining someone's career over a bad deal. I learned to nod and smile and change the subject. I started living on a weird clock. Sleep during the day, work at night, try to show up for family dinners when I could. I missed my mom's birthday because I had a booking in Banja Luka. I told her I had an important exam. The lie came out so easily it scared me later. My sister called one weekend when I was supposed to visit her new baby. I canceled last minute, saying I was sick. I could hear the disappointment in her voice. The apartment I kept for work slowly became my real home. I had clothes in the closet I'd never wear around my parents. Different makeup, 2 phones. Every night I'd delete messages, clear the browser history, make up stories about where I'd been, studying with friends, extra shift at the cafe. The words lost their meaning after a while. Some nights were just strange. One client wanted me to wear a specific perfume and talk about my childhood for hours before anything else. Another paid me to sit in silence with him while he watched the city from the hotel window. I started noticing I didn't react the way I used to. Things that would have shocked me in the beginning. Odd requests, sudden mood changes, men who wanted to pretend I was their girlfriend for the night, just became part of the job. Old friendships faded. My university friends stopped inviting me out because I was always busy. I stopped reaching out too. It was easier to stay in my own bubble. The money was still good. I paid for my dad's new glasses. I covered repairs on the apartment. My parents looked healthier, less worried. That part felt good. But I was disappearing in the process. I remember one morning waking up in a luxury hotel, staring at the ceiling and realizing I couldn't remember what day of the week it was. I had 3 bookings that week and a final exam I hadn't studied for. I canceled the exam. University felt like something from another life. Little habits changed too. I'd automatically check the exits when I entered a new room. I carried emergency cash in my bra. When a client canceled last minute, I felt this wave of relief that embarrassed me. Expensive dinners stopped feeling special. The nice hotels all started to look the same. I'd catch myself laughing at jokes I didn't find funny, touching someone I didn't want to touch, and moving on like it was nothing. The worst part was how normal it all became. I'd look at old photos on my phone of me smiling in the university cafe and feel this distant sadness, like looking at someone else. I told myself I was still in control. I was doing it for my family. I was only selling my time. By the time I'd been doing it for over a year, I barely recognized the girl I used to be. I moved through days on autopilot, smiling for clients, lying to my parents, counting money, deleting evidence. Survival mode had become my default setting. One regular client texted me about a trip to Dubai. Big money, a whole week. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I said yes. It felt like just another booking. I'd been doing this for over a year when my regular client, let's call him Marco, messaged me about Dubai. A whole week, big money, all expenses paid. He said it would be a nice break, some sun, good food. I'd traveled with clients before and it had been okay. So I said yes. I told my parents I got a short-term interpreting job abroad. They were proud. The first day in Dubai seemed fine. The hotel was huge, marble everywhere, views of the sea. Marco was in a good mood. He took me to dinner at a fancy place with live music. But by the second day, I noticed he wanted me with him constantly, not just evenings, breakfast, pool, meetings, everything. He started making requests that felt different from before, more controlling, more humiliating. By day 3, the mask slipped. When I tried to say I needed some time alone or that I wasn't comfortable with certain things, his tone changed. He'd smile, but his eyes got cold. "You're here because I paid for you," he said once, very quietly. "Don't make this difficult." The threats started small, then they got specific. He had photos. He knew where my family lived. He could send everything with one message. The rest of the week became a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I smiled when we were out in public. I did what he wanted. Inside, I was counting the hours until the flight home. I barely ate. I slept maybe 2 or 3 hours a night. Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it was him reminding me what he could do. The luxury around me, private driver, expensive dinners, the beautiful suite, made it all feel even worse. Nothing could hide how trapped I felt. The flight back was silent. Marco barely spoke to me. He just transferred the rest of the money and left me at the airport like I was luggage. I landed in Sarajevo early in the morning. The air felt colder than I remembered. I took a taxi straight home instead of going to my other apartment first. When I walked in, Mom was in the kitchen making coffee. She looked up and smiled, that tired, loving smile she always has. "Sorry, you're back. How was the trip?" She came over to hug me. I stood there in the doorway, still wearing the expensive clothes he'd bought me, feeling like every inch of me was covered in something I couldn't wash off. I looked at her face, her kind eyes, the lines from years of worry, and something inside me just broke. I couldn't bring this dirt into our home anymore. I couldn't keep lying. I couldn't keep pretending I was okay. That morning I knew I was done, completely done. No more, just one more booking. No more telling myself I was in control. This had to end. I tried to quit 3 times before it actually stuck. The first time I lasted 4 days. The money ran out fast, and the silence in my head got too loud. I almost picked up the phone again. The second time a client kept messaging, offering easy money, and I felt this pull like I was letting my family down by saying no. Fear was everywhere. I changed my number twice, deleted every trace of that life I could find, but the nightmares still came. Waking up thinking I was back in that Dubai hotel, heart racing, sheets soaked in sweat. My sister saved me. I finally broke down and told her everything one rainy afternoon in her kitchen. She didn't judge me. She just held me while I cried like a child. She helped me block contacts, come up with stories for my parents, and find a cheap room in another part of town for a while. I took a job cleaning offices at night. My hands got rough, my back hurt, but it was honest. I lived on almost nothing. There were days I missed the easy money so much it made me angry at myself. Rebuilding was slow and ugly. I had panic attacks in supermarkets when someone looked at me too long. I didn't know how to talk to normal people anymore. Trust felt dangerous. I started seeing a counselor through a women's support center. It helped, but some sessions I just sat there staring at the floor. The shame didn't go away easy. I still catch myself lying about small things out of habit. I had to learn how to fill my days without the constant adrenaline of that other life. Ordinary life felt boring at first, empty. Living with my parents again was hard. They never knew the full truth, but they saw I was different. I work now as an assistant at a rehabilitation center for people dealing with trauma and addiction. It's not the psychology degree I dreamed of, but it's close. I make coffee for the therapists, organize files, sit with clients sometimes when they need someone to listen. Helping others keeps me grounded. I go home every evening to my parents, help with dinner, watch my dad's favorite shows with him. It's quiet. It's real. I still can't forgive myself for believing I could control it all, that I was only selling my time. I lost something I can't get back, some part of my trust in people, some piece of lightness I used to have. There are nights I still feel dirty even after long showers. I look at my sister with her family and feel both happy for her and sad for what I missed. But I'm here, I'm 27, I survived, and every day I choose this harder, smaller life because it's mine. If you're listening to this and you're in that world right now, just know it's okay to want out. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but you're worth more than what they're paying you. I wanted to save my family from poverty, and in the end, I almost lost myself. Don't make the same mistake I did.